بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا ولجميع المسلمين. قال المؤلف رحمه الله: ويعفى في غير مائع ومطعوم عن يسير دم نجس من حيوان طاهر وعن أثر استجمار، ولا ينجس الآدمي بالموت ولا ما لا نفس له سائلة متولد من طاهر، وبول ما يؤكل لحمه وروثه ومني الآدمي ورطوبة فرج المرأة وسؤر الهرة ما دونها في الخلقة طاهر، وسباع البهائم والطير والحمار الأهلي والبغل منه نجسة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. طيب, in the last dars we went over Najāsah, مغلظة, متوسطة and مخففة, and we went over a lot of the things that will fall under those categories, and inshallah we'll continue with the matan to finish it today inshallah by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are a few things I want to discuss that I left out for the sake of time last time. أولا القي, يعني what is that? Vomit, throw up, when you throw out your food, right? Here, before I continue, if you're watching the video, pause it. If you're here, I'm going to ask you, and not anybody that was in my earlier durus, you guys are cheaters, right? If you have not been in my earlier durus, what is the hukam on vomit? Is it najis or not? Not najis? You were in the earlier dars, I told you that's cheating. Tayyib, if you say not najis, what is the dalil for that? Islam QA?
How far it was digested.
That's good. But okay, so let's say it was digested. But I mean, you know how usually when you throw up, the smell is different, the color is different. Najis? So what's the dalil for that? I saw in Islam QA that it's not najis. Tayyib. The popular opinion we hear a lot nowadays, and I mean, there are madhahib, right? So there is the Hanafi madhab, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali, not in order, Dahiri and so on. Now we have the new school madhab, like people who just watched a lot of YouTube videos, and mashallah, they're ulama now. The popular opinion we hear a lot nowadays is that it's not najis. And if you go to Islam QA or whatever, and may Allah reward those who work on that site, it's an amazing site, this is what you will usually find. And the dalil we usually see is that there is no dalil sarih for it to be najis. And that is a good point. Everything is tahir until proven najis. Now, there is a hadith which has been reported on this, and I'll mention that first just to kind of get it out of the way so people can understand, where it's mentioned about those things that are najis, and this is reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he ordered that you should be washed from dam, the 7 things mentioned in the hadith. Khair, the hadith is da'if, as An-Nabawi and others have mentioned that bi'atifaq al-ulama, with the consensus of the ulama, this is a weak narration. So khalas, that cannot be used as the narration. But I'll mention it, which is hadith ya Ammar, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the weak narration has mentioned, he told Ammar radiyallahu anhu, إِنَّمَا يَغْسَلْ, verily you should wash الثَّوْب min khams. And then another rawayah, there is 7 that are mentioned. In this rawayah there's khams. Min غَعِث, يعني from the stool, wal bowl, from the urine, and so on, and blood is mentioned, and al-qay, يعني vomit. And Nabawi points out that no doubt this hadith is weak, with multiple points of weaknesses. So this cannot be used as a dalil. So this is out. Tayyib. So now we go to the other opinions that come on this. And before we get into madahib, because what I find from a lot of the new school brothers coming out is they will say, well, the Zahiriyya and Shawkani and Ibn Hazm and other Imma and Ulama took it to be tahir, which is not exactly right. This is again, people make a little mistake. So I'm going to try to explain. So first thing, what is al-qay? Yani what is, and in English we call it vomit or throw up, but what is it? And this is why you should always go, when you're studying a book of fiqh or yani istalah or whatever, always go to a book written to help you with the linguistics of it. A lot of times you assume you know what it is, but really, and this is why Al-Mutla' ala al-Alfad al-Muqni' of Al-Ba'li, I've suggested this book, or the works of Fayoumi and others that I've mentioned in different durus to get, to help you with the wording. So al-qay, as we know, is al-kharij min al-ta'am ba'd al-istiqrarihi min al-ma'ida. It is what comes out of food after it has changed or it has been yani, processed in the stomach. So remember that definition when we talk about it. If we take that definition, then under that definition, no doubt the Am ulama from the Salaf and Khalaf, including all four of the Madahib and the Dahiriyah, and Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and others have taken that to be najis. I didn't say ijma', I didn't say consensus, although An-Nawawi and others have reported this to be an issue of consensus. Shaykhuna Albani rahmatullah alayh, Shaykhuna Ibn Uthaymeen, and Imam al-Shawkani, they did not take this view. They took it to be tahir. Shaykhuna Albani objected to the opinion saying that it's ijma'an by pointing out that the Zahiriyah and Shawkani and others disagreed. But there is a point we will get to here. Ibn Hazm, who is one of the best known from the Zahiri ulama. Yani there are Dawood al-Zahiri, the one that is named after, there are other A'imma and ulama, but if you ask most Tullab ilm for a reference, or ulama, a reference for the Zahiri madhab, al-Muhalla is mentioned. In al-Muhalla, Ibn Hazm, he writes, al-qay min kulli muslimin aw kafirin haramun, that vomit, throw up from every Muslim or kafir is forbidden, and it is wajib, yajibu, that ijtinabahu, yani to stay away from it, not to take it in or not to eat it or lick it or eat, Why? لقول صلى الله عليه وسلم, لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, from this hadith of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, aid, yani the one who takes back hibatihi, his gift, is like the aid, the one who takes back qayhihi, yani which is his vomit. Ibn Hazm makes a point here. He says, so because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed the tahrim of somebody licking or taking their vomit, and a tahrim in things of eating is usually, and not always, but usually an indication towards its najasa. Tayyib, I'm not using this dalil, me, here for this dars. I'm just showing you what Ibn Hazm said. And that is why Al-Lajna al-Da'ima and Shaykhuna Abdul Aziz ibn Baz and other A'imma and Ulama, they pointed the Dahiriyah to take al-qay to be najis from this statement. Tayyib. Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah, Abu al-Abbas, as the famous Ibn Taymiyyah, he said about al-qay najisun. And this is, you can find in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, in the 21st volume, page number 597. Why am I giving you the page and volume? Because I recently read somebody said that he didn't say it's najis, and when I looked through all his works, I did not find that quote to be true. So that graduate from an Islamic university made a mistake. May Allah forgive us and him. And I'm giving you the reference so you can check it yourself. Also, I cross-referenced it with his sharh of Umdatul Fiqh of Ibn Qudama, his sharh of Al-Umda. In the bigger volume that has been printed, it's volume number 1, page 108. He shows that al-qay is najis, and he says that what is the dalil that Taqiyuddin ibn Taymiyyah is presenting. And again, this is not me presenting it, I'm just presenting what he put. He said, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he vomited qa'a fatawadda, and he performed the wudu'. And if you look at something that comes, yani happens, and the washing of the hands and mouth and nose and the place as done by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is given in Sharia, إِنَّهُ لَا يَكُونُ, it will not be إِلَّا عَن نَجَاسَةٍ, it will not be except for najasa. Why? Because it would be, if unnecessary, a waste of water. So this is his dalil. But I just wanted to show that this is what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi has also presented. This is also the opinion presented by the fatwa of the Lajna Da'ima and Shaykh Abdulaziz ibn Baz, except they said, except for a little bit, which is correct. I mean, a little bit of vomit is not najis, or if you got a little traces left of it. Why? Qiyasan ala dam, with qiyas on blood. Tayyib. Now when we look at adilla, proofs for this, before I go to them, I want to mention two halat. One hal is where you vomit and it has changed in your stomach. That food has now changed in your stomach. One is like you're eating something and while you're eating you throw it back up. Like the food has not changed. Its color, its taste, its smell is really pretty much the same. You were just eating, you kind of start choking, you throw it back up. The other is what it has changed. If you are talking about that which has changed, then I did not find any alim before Ash-Shawkani, before the great scholar Ash-Shawkani, that took it to be tahir. So those a'imma and ulama before Ash-Shawkani that mention the ijma' on this issue, they have a point. Because if Ash-Shawkani and people later on had khilaf on this, you have to prove earlier to show that those a'imma and ulama like An-Nawawi and Ibn Qudama and others that mentioned ijma' did not had somebody who disagreed. Tayyib. But I'm not going to quote ijma' as a dalil. I'm just pointing these adilla out to you. Tayyib. When we get to vomiting, we see that in the Sahih Hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he vomited, he performed wudu. Tayyib. We have a weak narration where Rasulullah sallallahu actually ordained for it to be washed and called it najis. Tayyib. Do we have a sarih, clear dalil that it is tahir? No. Tayyib. So now, before we can say we have no adilla, we have to look at other methods of deriving fiqh. One of the methods that we find across the board, even Zahiriyya to a certain extent, as Ibn Hazm had done here, is qiyas. And istidlal. Ibn Hazm took istidlal from the hadith about the one who licks their vomit. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah took istidlal from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu vomiting and making wudu. But there is another qiyasi dalil, which is, what is the difference between food and stool? What is the difference? If you take food, like if you take an apple and a banana and nice cooked chicken and rice and things like this, is it tahir or najis? It's tahir. But stool is tahir or najis? Najis. You're not going to come with some new opinion that ghaid al-adami is tahir, right? Okay. Tayyib, it's najis. What is stool? It's processed food. Is that right or wrong? So what is the illah here? It went through a digestive process and now it came out as najis. Tayyib? I'm not going ba'id here. Don't get weird with me. Why? Because what is the difference between khamar and khal? The process. What is the difference between fruit and khamar? A process. If you take a non-organic matter and put it through a process to make it an intoxicant, ijma'an, that comes under the ruling of khamar, right? Najis then past that, but khamar ijma'an, right? Why? Because they say the illah is the same. Okay. So now, one of the adillah of vomit, once it has changed, is the fact that it has gone through the same process that ghaid, the stool, feces goes through. So this shows it to be najāsah. And this is now supported by the Sahih Hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam vomited and performed wudu. Okay? Now it is supported by the Sahih Hadith where Rasulullah forbid the person from licking the vomit by giving the example as a warning. Now it will be supported by the weaker hadith, because we've already had Sahih hadith support this, right? Of when Rasulullah ordered to wash it, and so on and so on. And obviously the acceptance by all four of the madahib, and in that form of Zahiriyya, as Ibn Hazm has mentioned here, and Shaykh ibn Taymiyyah and other A'imma and Ulama that accepted this view. An-Nawawi, he writes in Al-Majmu', his Sharh Muhaddab, he says, An-Najāsah al-Qay' muttafaqun alayha. The najasa of vomit, there is agreement upon it, سوا فيه يعني قيء الآدمي أو غيره, whether it is the vomit of humans or other than it from the حيوانات, that it and سوا خارج القيء يعني whether it is متغير or غير متغير according to An-Nawawi, and whether it is on purpose or not and so on, that it is najis. He said the only exception is the madhab of Malik, which is that if it has not changed, then it is tahir. This is An-Nawawi in Al-Majmu'. If we look at the Zahiriyya, we also find the same, that Ash-Shawkani is not from the A'imma of Zahiriyya. People assume that, but he's not. Ibn Hazm is. Ibn Hazm and others from the Zahiriyya, when they said about al-qay', vomit, being tahir, they also said that it is the one that has not been changed from its original state. So, what we find is when we separate the two conditions, then when vomit has changed from its original state in the stomach of a person, then no doubt that the correct opinion, بالأدلة والقياس والاتفاق العلماء حتى ممكن أن نقول الإجماع, that it is now najis. But vomit that is of food that has not changed, there is khilaf of ulama. Even here the Jamhur will take the opinion that it is najis, but the adillah, because then we lose the qiyas, and then when we lose the qiyas, we lose also the understanding of what the word al-qay' means. And this is why I began this with what? The definition. And this is why brothers who are like to dabble in ilm, they like to just, like a little mouse, they just want to, just give me the mu'tamid. Why do you need me then? Go buy a book and then read it, right? Or buy al-Hidayah or whatever, Quduri or whatever, right? Or just give me the hadith. Okay, I can give you one hadith. What about the other hadith? What about qiyas? What about ijma'? Sharia is not just based on you picking up al-Bukhari. So when people dabble and they don't look at the depth of the mas'ala, then they come up with strange opinions. But if you look at the depth of the mas'ala, then no doubt, if you take the definition of al-qay', then now you don't really have khilaf on this issue in reality. It is just semantics then. So if you're eating something and you just started to eat it and you throw it back up and it's, it still looks like food and hasn't really changed, then that's not najis. But if you ate it and it changed in your stomach and then you drank some Tijuana tea or something and then you threw up your food, and now all of that has changed, it has that bad smell, it doesn't look like food anymore, that now that has come out, that is najis. I like to go into depth with some of these issues just a little bit because I don't like people being like superficial with knowledge. Tayyib, a few other masail before I get into the wording of the matan and so on. The urine of those animals that are halal for consumption. And this is a mas'ala that people who have lack of basara, foresight, and they're very skeptical about, but let's talk about this. So first thing, I want to remind the brothers and sisters, when we talk about najasa, we are not talking about what you find as pleasing or not. Right? Personally, you know what zucchinis are? Zucchinis? They call them lady fingers too, right? Zucchinis? Okra. I find it disgusting. Personal, I'm not saying anything. I look at it, I feel like throwing up. Me personally. Right? That's me. That doesn't mean you may love it. Is it najis? No. Should I eat it? No, I don't have to eat it. It's not wajib on me. It's healthy, but that's why I stay away from it. So, that's my personal preference. That's fine in the Sharia. The Sharia doesn't make it wajib on you to eat everything halal. Right? So, if you find something disgusting, don't eat it. That's up to you. But what is najis and tahir is a different issue. You might find something pleasing, but it's najis, you can't have it. You might find something, that's a personal decision. But the Sharia sets bi'adillah, with proofs, what is najasa and what is not. Urine, bowl al-adami, insan, humans, urine, and urine in its asal, in its original hukam, is najis. That's the asal of it. But if we look at the hadith of the people that came from Uqal, this is a place, and they came to Medina. And the famous hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, it's muttafaqun alayh, and they became sick. I'm summarizing from the hadith. And they were people that were not used to city life, and they were not used to and today we can say maybe the bacterias and the different things that they were introduced to in Medina. I'll give you an example. Today we are here. If we travel to another country, most of us, if we go to a country that is very different from where we live, we're going to get sick, because our body has not built an immunity. Asim Billah is looking at me like, why are you getting into this, bro? This is my field, right? We have not built an immunity for the bacteria and viruses and things that are there once the body, right? If I'm off, correct, manhaj, check me, I'm good. Abdurrahman is also here to check me on that. So, this is how the body works. So these people, when they came to Medina, they got sick. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them, take some milk of the local camels and add some bits of urine from the camel in it and drink it. Those people, they drank that milk, and from it they got better. I'm not going to go into the rest of the hadith because it's not what I'm focused on here. I'm going to make a few points, because we have the people with diseases in their heart that are going to be like, oh, drink camel. No, you don't have to drink camel urine. That's not something in the Sharia. Right? But if you have a sickness, like the Sahaba didn't go around, like we see these YouTube videos now, like brothers going and just drinking camels. What are you doing? It's not like Sahaba didn't go around drinking camel's urine, right? But if you have a sickness, if you're sick and that will cure you, then to use that mixed with something as medicine is jais. And if you're freaking out about this, know that I work in the medical device and pharma field, combo products, and many of the medications that you do take, I guarantee, and me and there was a brother here named Dr. Faisal, we did a research on this before, contain urine of different animals. We found many medications that contains the urine of horses, right? And so on. And I typed this up, I didn't publish it, inshallah someday I will publish it as a little research paper, but this is something that's used for medication. So there's nothing weird about it. Now, what is the Shari'i hukam that we get from this that we are dealing with? That if that was najis, if it was considered najis, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have to have educated the people about how to cleanse from its najasa. Okay? And sometimes you could take something najis out of darura, out of necessity. That's not an issue. But then the hukam has to be explained. And Rasulullah did not tell them anything like this. So this is an indication that they are tahir. The next dalil for that is that hadith in Sahih Muslim, where Rasulullah was asked about praying in sheep pens and he allowed it. And obviously in the place where sheep they urinate and so on. So that tells us that those animals, that their meat is halal to eat, then their urine, and with qiyas from that, their feces and so on, would not be considered najis. Now, again, that doesn't mean that it's okay for you to go and start drinking camel urine. Not if you have a necessity. The people did it because they had a sickness, then khalas, you can mix it up as a medication and use it, but not regularly. But it does show that there is not a najasa here, and that's in the matan as well, but I wanted to discuss it here clearly. Tayyib. Now, I wanted to give this summary, which I had documented in one of the earlier durus, but I found it to be beneficial. So I'm going to give the summary, and then I'm going to read from the matan, and we'll be done, inshallah, with this bab. Things that are najis. And this is why I like to summarize, because sometimes I've been told that I go into tangents and details. So the summary is for you to memorize. Everybody should memorize this. Things that are najis. Bowl, urine, al-wadi', stool. Al-wadi', we already discussed what al-wadi' is. And the vomit that has changed from al-insan. The urine, feces, vomit, which is al-qay, which has changed, right, in the stomach. And al-wadi' are all najasa. What is it? Najasa what? Mutawassita. Al-madi is also najis from the man, but al-madi is mukhaffafa. Human blood of human is najis, but a small amount would be excused. Same thing is true for vomit. Right? And we know the adillah that we mentioned about this, about Ibn Umar and popping the pimple and so on. Blood that gushes forth from an animal that is slaughtered, bi-adillah min al-Quran wa sahih ahadith and so on, is najis, but a small amount again is excusable. Urine, meat and dung of the animals that is not halal to eat. Those that are haram to eat, including, let's say, wolves or tigers or lions or dogs or all of those animals, those would be najis. Dead animals, even if they were halal, if they were slaughtered correctly, but they died in a way that was not. What is that called? Mayta. That is najis. Tayyib. Alcohol, khamar, is najis. Al-kafir is najis, but not hissiyya. What is that? Ma'nawiyya. Things that are not najis. Small amounts of blood that remain within the meat after being slaughtered. We know if you slaughter animal, small amounts, even if you let the blood flow, they remain. Now, may Allah protect us if anybody eats mayta, if anybody eats the meat from Vons and Albertsons and stuff because you think the fatwa will save you in front of Allah somehow. If you do, by the way, because the blood doesn't drain. If you want to watch, there's a documentary called Food Inc. Watch it. I mean, maybe there's some music, you want to maybe turn it off or whatever, but it is an educational documentary. And see how the animals are killed. The blood doesn't drain. There's a PETA documentary as well, when the animals hit on the head. And here in California, In-N-Out Burgers facility, by the way. Then the blood doesn't drain, so there large amounts of blood is there. That would be najis as well. Khair, the corpse or the dead body of a Muslim or a kafir, hissiyan, is tahir. Tayyib. Flies or other small animals that do not have what's called flowing blood. Right? Animals have, I think one is called open circulatory system and closed circulatory, whatever, but like the fly that does not have flowing blood, those are tahir. And the dalil for that is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the fly fell, he said, you dip it. If it's najis, and if you dip it and najasa comes, then it would be najis. So then that, the fly and those animals that are like it, those, I don't know if they're called animals, but those would be tahir. Fish and locust are tahir. Why? Because the clear hadith, and we've mentioned this already. The believer, the mu'min, is never najis. The mu'min, not in life, not in death, not in hadath, not in, even though you could take on najasa. Yani a mu'min can take on, you can become najis in the sense that there is najasa on you, but the mu'min himself and herself, the mu'mina, is never najis. Tayyib. Dung and urine of animals that are halal to eat are tahir. The mani of insan is tahir. Leftover food and drink from a cat or animals like the cat in its size and its characteristics would be tahir. And the hadith sahih for that The hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the cat, that they are tawafun, they are the ones that are roaming around you. Laysa binajisin. Laysat binajisin. It is not najis. Clear, sahih hadith. Tayyib, let me finish the matan now. Here we talked about khufiya mu'di' al-najasa. We talked about in the last dars, but I'll just, if the place of najasa, where you became najis, is not clear. Let's say you got najasa on your left sleeve, but you're not sure where it is. You wash all of the sleeve, or as much as needed, to bring yaqeen, to be sure that the najasa is gone. This is something that we mentioned in the last dars as well, but we'll mention it here. Tayyib, what if you got najasa on your thobe, and then you totally forget where on the thobe? What do? Wash the whole thobe. If you're sure it was on the bottom part of the thobe, but you're not sure where, then wash the whole bottom, right? Until you have yaqeen that the najasa is gone. Tayyib, the bowl of the ghulam. What is ghulam? The baby boy that does not eat solid foods, right? And al-madi, the clear pre-seminal fluid that does not have smell or color, then those two things, you just sprinkle water on it. You don't have to wash. Yeah? And those, we mentioned the hadith for those already in the last dars, but I'm just finishing the matan here. And if some najasa falls into what is not solid, then it cannot be cleansed. Okay? Let's say you have oil at home, cooking oil. All right? And some najasa falls into cooking oil. A drop of urine falls into it. Right? Can you cleanse that? No. Right? Unless you're going to find some molecular machine from the future and change. Khalas. And it mixes, so that najasa cannot be cleansed. If it's less than qullatayn, what happens now? It's najis. What do you have to do? Throw it out. Is that israf? La. Because the hadith about the walagh al-kalb, Rasulullah said to spill it out. If it's more than qullatayn, liquid, let's say you have a lot of cooking oil, you cook a lot. I don't know how much you cook that you have more than qullatayn oil at home. And some najasa falls in it, then it's tahir. The hadith of qullatayn. If you have ghee, you know what ghee is? It's actually an Arabic word. I thought it was animal fat. It's what you cook with it, right? Lard, but lard sometimes we mean pork. I'm not talking about pork here. But you have solid ghee, and najasa falls on it. Now can you cleanse it? Yes, because it does not mix. So if you scoop out everything that touched the najasa, you scoop it out and throw it, and this is the matan, I'm just trying to explain it a little bit easier, right? Then the rest of it did not come in contact with najasa, so it is tahir. It can be cleansed. Small amounts of blood, as we mentioned, is excusable. Also, if you make istijmar, you know istijmar? What's istijmar? Come on, man. Right? After qada al-haja, you use other than water, whether it's a rock, whether it's dirt, whether it's toilet paper, and you use that to cleanse yourself. You know it has to be a minimum of 3. This is not the bab for it. And the najasa ayniyah has to be lifted. You can't just be like kuffar, they just kind of wipe and then they got a disgusting thing called dingleberries. If you don't know what it is, I hope you never find out. I didn't know what it was until maybe like 10, 15 years ago, and I was disgusted for days when I found out what it is. Kuffar don't cleanse. There is that najasa hissiyya, unfortunately. Khair. But even if you clean and you take najasa ayniyah out, it's not like water. So there may be small traces that are not visible to you, but there may be small traces, and those are excusable because istijmar is allowable before salah and so on. That which is born out of pure animals will be pure. That which is born out of najasa, like the dung beetle, it's born out of najasa, is najis. Because that's where it's born out of, that's where it comes from. Leftover of cats and animals like its size will be tahir, and I mentioned the adillah already for this in this mas'ala already, I'm just covering here. Predatory beasts, and birds of prey, larger than a cat, obviously, because we mentioned the cat has the exception already, and donkeys that are ahliya, domesticated, and mules in the same category are najis. The dalil, regarding the donkey, there is a hadith that is muttafaqun alayh. Inna Allah wa rasuluhu, this famous hadith, Sahih Muslim has this wording, has forbidden on you luhum al-humur al-ahliya in the rawaya, innaha rijsun, wa najis. And this is the longer hadith. This is the same time that mut'ah after the battle of Khaybar was made to be haram as well. Even though mut'ah was forbidden in 3 stages. So this tells you that if donkey meat is haram, tahrim shows najasa, right? But now, what's called a non-domesticated donkey, which in some of the ulama's books, the ulama have mentioned this is also the zebra, that those are not najis. Those would be like horses and so on. And their meat would be halal. You could eat zebra, but you cannot eat domesticated donkeys. Tayyib. So here, what about birds of prey? As we mentioned, the hadith about qullatayn, if you look at in some of the rawayat, the earlier question that was asked was about places where these types of birds would come and drink and so on. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if it's more than qullatayn, then it's not affected. And what does the istidlal and what does that prove? That if it's less than qullatayn, then those animals drinking from there would have made it najis. So those are najis. Tayyib, inshallah, that ends the bab here, and we'll begin with Bab al-Hayd next dars. Jazakumullahu khairan. Any questions? Faddalu Adam.